It's just a great paranormal evening, everybody. Welcome to a special edition of Matt's Paranormal Talk. We have special guest today, Dave Schrader from Paranormal 60 joining us. What's going on, Brandon?
Oh, yeah. There we go.
There we go. I was all by myself. I was kind of scared.
Yeah. All right.
Do your kids' parents know you're doing this tonight?
Oh, I know, right? Jeez.
Oh, man.
They left me unsupervised for a while. It was kind of scary.
I told you not to touch anything, Davey, but I guess just you being on the podcast causes problems technologically.
The way it looks. Well, hey, Dave. Well, thanks for joining us tonight.
Everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it's a joy to have you. Could you tell our guests a little bit who you are?
Yeah, my name is Dave Schrader. You might recognize me as Norm from Cheers. And you don't. Oh, no, I wasn't sure. Yeah, I've been involved in the paranormal and part of paranormal radio throughout the Twin Cities of Minneapolis, St. Paul for the last 18 and a half years with Darkness Radio and now with the Paranormal 60. You can also hear me on WCCO radio on Sunday nights from 7 to 9 p.m. on the Paranormal 360 radio program. I've been a lead investigator on the Holzer Files paranormal TV show at Ghosts of Devil's Perch. I've been on about a dozen episodes of Ghost Adventures, Haunted Hospitals, Paranormal State. So I've been around for a while doing this stuff and loving all aspects of the strange and supernatural.
Awesome. How did you get into it, becoming a paranormal investigator?
Well, it was in the back of a comic book. I bought the How to Become a Licensed Paranormal Professional for $14.99, and it gave me the free X-ray specs. And neither worked very well at all.
Yeah, I got disappointed on that set too.
I've been around it my whole life. It's been in my life, and I've witnessed many strange things, and I've had psychic phenomena, ghostly visions, shadow people. I went out and went to the Assetti Ranch back in 2006 and saw UFOs. I've been to most of the major hotspots across the United States for hauntings and Bigfoot and UFO legends and lore. So that also pushed me out into the field of going to Europe. So I've been all over checking that stuff out too.
Dang.
I caught something in an interview I watched of you online. What is who is the Bloody Bones Man? I've never heard of that before. Actually.
Well, it's a good thing you ask, and boy, I'm glad I've got a book right here. My new book, Theater of the Mind, Tales from the Darkness, includes a Bloody Bones Man story. Bloody Bones Man was a very interesting character that was brought to us, kind of in the vein of Shadow Men and the Black-Eyed Kids. And we were doing Darkness Radio, and we were talking a lot about the Black-Eyed Kids, and I had somebody reach out to me and say, hey, I love listening to your show. I'm entertained by it. I don't really believe in the paranormal, but I did have this experience as a child. And they were saying basically they were sleeping in their bed. They were tossing and turning, having a hard time falling asleep, and they were laying there for a while. And when they rolled over, there was this man laying in bed next to them looked like Freddy Krueger without the sweater and without the hat. So it was just this, you could just see his back, and it was that mass of twisted muscles and sinew and blood. And he said, I couldn't see its face, but I could tell it was smiling. And I just laid there frozen in terror. And finally, this kid got the nerve to roll off the other side of the bed and run across the room. So he had to run past the side where the thing was laying and run out of the room. Then he thinks, maybe I'm just having a bad dream. So he starts going back down the hall, and he hears his bed creak, and something hits the floor, and it sounds like something heavy rolling. So he goes in and spends the night with his parents.
Oh, wow.
He said that's the only experience he ever had with it, and he doesn't know if it was paranormal or not. And I'm like, well, if it's not paranormal, what the hell do you think it is? Do your parents just like store skinned human bodies in bed with people? What makes more confident sense to you? So that was the first indoctrination we had to the Bloody Bones Man. And then we just started hearing weird stories from people around the world that had experiences seeing this creature. So I started actually doing some digging, and there are references to the Bloody Bones Man going back into the late 1600s, especially over in Europe. And if you saw the Bloody Bones Man, usually you would open up a cabinet or cupboard or that area under your stairs. You would usually see him. And when you caught a glimpse of him, he would be sitting on a pile of children's bones. And they would be naughty children that cursed or were rude to their parents or didn't listen. So the Bloody Bones Man was the boogeyman. He was the one that would take the bad kids and eat them raw. So it was a very creepy story. I'd never heard it before until this guy told us his story. And then we started hearing all these other ones. My other favorite one was this couple. She goes, I got to tell you, this weirdest experience ever. I heard about you talking about the Bloody Bones Man. She goes, so my boyfriend and I came back to my house and my parents weren't home and we're becoming intimate on the couch and things are going along fine. And at one point, the boyfriend who was above her leans down, and there over his shoulder, she now sees the Bloody Bones Man standing at the end of the couch watching.
Heck no.
Right. So this is kind of one of those mixed blessing stories where part of you is like turtling and going, oh God, no. The other part of you is about ready to laugh because she says she starts whimpering. This only spurs her boyfriend on, thinking he's doing something pretty remarkable, not realizing that she's going, because there's something creepy standing before them. And this guy's like, I am a rock star. And she said when he finished and pushed back up and blocked her view, when he moved again, the Bloody Bones Man was gone. So that was another one of my favorite kind of creepy versions of his story. But yeah, no thanks. Like we as men don't have enough problems with performance anxiety. Now we have to wonder if there's some creepy supernatural dude standing there watching it.
Right, that is true.
Right.
So for people that like those kind of stories, you can get my new book, Theater of the Mind, Tales from the Darkness, which is 15 real accounts of paranormal stories from people all around the United States. 2 of my stories are in here. I've got a haunted hospital and a paranormal ghost doll story.
We gotta hear that just because Davey loves dolls.
Oh, there's nothing to be afraid of. They hardly ever eat your soul.
Hardly ever.
No.
Okay. So what's question since we're on? Go ahead.
I'm curious what the the origins of the Bloody Bone Man is specifically. Did you ever find out?
I don't. Yeah, like I said, I could find stories back going into the 1600s where they would just tell these stories. I think a lot of these things are cautionary tale stories, right? You would talk about the beast in the woods. You would talk about the water fairies. You would talk about the Bloody Bones Man. In my opinion, as a way to try to control your children, to keep the children from doing something naughty, right? Don't go by the water. We know as kids, you tell me don't go by the water, you could drown. You're like, I'm not going to drown. I know what I'm doing, and I'm not going to get too close. And you don't mean to, but you get too close and slip in, right? So I think a lot of these creatures, the water creature that'll drag you under, or the creature in the woods, these are things meant to frighten children, to give them a sense beyond the normal. So the kids that have no fear of just how dangerous the woods and water could be on their own, or lying and being rude to your parents could be. This is just something that adds to it and gives another element of maybe I should think about this before I do it. So that being said, how could they be having this experience with this man? I don't know. Maybe there's, in a lot of those old folkloric stories, maybe there's a germ of truth. Maybe there are visions of these beings, and people started ascribing other elements to them. Like, well, if you see him, that's because you're being naughty. They're not denying that it's being seen. They don't know what it is. So let's ascribe something to it. Like, you're naughty, you're cursing, you're being disrespectful to your parents or teachers. And, then we can kind of keep control of the fear.
Right.
Yeah.
Use it to your advantage, or,
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Like you said, in a lot of those stories, there is a shred of truth, however small it could be. So that's really interesting. I've never heard of that before.
Back to the 1600s, that's before well documented written history was, so it's hard to figure out
well, there are versions of Slender Man that even go back further. And we think Slender Man, we think of that as being an early 2000s contest character that was created for a website. And the guy, he's captured the imagination of the world with these creepy stories. But we can find that there are iterations of a Slender Man in many different ages, religious backgrounds, system. So, there's something to these creatures that seems to transcend what we know as, just they're not just folklore. They're not necessarily fully developed paranormal beings, but they seem to be somewhere in between.
Yep. Yeah, like
They
Krampus.
transcend cultures.
Exactly.
Krampus.
It might not be exactly the
Krampus,
same, but in several different cultures, there's something of a similar depiction in. So yeah.
Now I got a question.
Yep.
Why do you think spirits, entities attach themselves to like an object? In my case, to dolls. Why dolls?
Well, that's simple enough. Now, I don't know that what they've done is fully imbued their ghost onto that item, but think about dolls. Think about stuffed animals and toys, things that we often hear are haunted.
Yep.
And sometimes, right. And a lot of things that we hear about them is that there's something angry around them.
Yeah.
Or you hear relentless crying, right?
Yep.
Things like that. So think about when you're vulnerable and you were a kid, you would clutch your favorite stuffed animal or your favorite action figure, and that was your go-to. That was the thing that helped bring you comfort. Your blankie, your stuffed animal, your doll. And in some cases, maybe people are imbuing parts of their fears onto these dolls, right? This is the doll that helped me get through being sexually abused as a child, or physically abused by my father for this and that. And I'm not saying I was, I'm just giving it as an example. And if you're putting that kind of psychic energy into something to try to bring you peace, you're almost doing this, you're giving it affection in exchange for it helping to take away the negativity. And then it eventually, like Woody and Buzz, gets put in a box in the attic somewhere, but they're still with that energy. And then if you reintroduce it into the public and you reintroduce it to human activity and emotions, maybe that's enough to reignite or spark that energy, the depressive, angry, sad, or maybe even very happy. We've caught dolls, and I've had dolls that were given to me that freak people out because they'll hear laughter coming from a room. And they go in and the doll is the only thing in the room and they can hear laughter. So that's nothing to be afraid of. It's unnerving and unsettling, but that doesn't mean it's evil. So I think that in a lot of cases, items become haunted because of our connection to them and the energy we put into them. I'm fully aware that at some point I'm going to look out my dad's backyard window and see a ghost of him on his riding lawnmower, because my dad's Zen garden, his happy place, is driving on his lawn, on his riding lawnmower over his 1 acre property, mowing it and keeping it manicured perfectly. My dad's obsessed with his yard and lawn. So I'm sure while the rest of people are going to be dealing with ghosts of grandpa in the house, mine's going to be out in the backyard clipping the hedges and weeding, He'll only come inside and haunt me if I'm not keeping up with the lawn work.
That's great.
Good Lord. What's the most interesting haunted object that you've heard of?
Most interesting haunted object. All right. How broad an audience do you have at this time of night?
Right. Pretty good.
Okay.
So we're pretty good.
I think the most haunted object that I refused to hold it, but I was looked at it and was told the story behind it, was a vibrating device that was, I think you got the gist of it. It was a vibrating device that was integral in this couple's happiness. And when the husband passed, the wife said that this thing would turn itself on, which obviously is a male ghost, because we always turn ourselves on with that, right? So she would find it. She'd come home from work and it would be laying on the bed. When she knew that it was in a drawer or put away, she would find it. She would go on a vacation with her friends and open up the bag to find it in the bag. So she thought her husband was, hey, remember me, and he's including it from time to time. We can hope it's that and not the Bloody Bones Man. I don't know.
True.
So that would be the weirdest haunted item I've heard about so far. But there are rings, there are toys, there's I once had Marianne Winkowski on my radio show. She's the real life ghost whisperer.
Yeah.
She was the person that the show was based on. As a matter of fact, if you watch the credits, it's like creative consultant is Marianne Winkowski. And I had her on my show doing readings for people. And she's got a really interesting way of connecting. She doesn't consider herself psychic or medium. However, if you think you have a ghost and you talk to her by phone or you leave a message for her, if she can hear the message and begin to see inside your home, you have a ghost. The ghost becomes like a closed circuit TV for her. If you don't, if she can't see anything, you don't have a ghost. So I was very skeptical of these claims at first. And I decided, well, if I'm going to have her on, I'm going to load the phones with my friends so I know their story. And I know that none of her friends are secretly calling in and loading oh, yeah, yes, you're exactly right.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of thing. So I was very skeptical of it. I loaded it. And one of my friends said, yeah, I think I have a ghost. And she goes, oh, you definitely have a ghost. She goes, you also have one of those little yappy dogs, right? And yeah. And that yappy dog will be laying there peaceful and quiet, and all of a sudden jump up and yipe and run off or cower. And they're like, yeah. And she goes, yeah, you have this old man ghost that does not like this dog. And sometimes he'll come by and kick it.
Oh my God.
And my friend's like, what the hell? And she's like, well, where did it come from? This only started, a couple months back. She goes, all right, let me see if I can follow it. I am being pulled to your garage, and in the garage, I see an appliance. So I can't tell if it's a lawnmower or a snowblower, but I get the sense that this was purchased at like an estate sale or a yard sale. This wasn't yours. You bought it recently. And they were like, yeah, we bought a lawnmower from an estate sale. And she's like, well, he's attached to the lawnmower, which I don't know about you three, but that's the most depressing news I've ever heard, is that I might one day be haunting my lawnmower. I mean, my lawnmower haunts me now. I don't like to be around it or near it. If I can, I throw holy water at it and try to get it,
back demon back.
Yeah.
Right. But oh my God, how horrific is that to think that even in the afterlife, you might. Now, for my dad, like I said, he's going to love that. Me, that's my version of hell. I will be forced to mow the lawn in hell for eternity.
Well, let's be fair. I'd hesitate to buy a lawnmower at an estate sale anyway. So, I mean, I don't know.
Well, you apparently don't know a good deal when you see one.
Well, that was
it comes with a free ghost.
Yeah.
It's
super discounted
one of the
for a reason.
reasons that the traditional cultures of Japan, not to kind of sidetrack too much, but we had some folks on from Japan that talked. They don't really do estate sales or sell other people's belongings specifically for that type of reason alone.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of an interesting thing that it's like, oh, great, estate sale, great sale. And
well, and maybe that's why Egyptians buried all of your worldly goods with you, is because they didn't want your ghost marching around. Look, hey, I found King Tutankhamun's vibrator. I think I'll just take it home. And next thing you know, King Tut's in the bedroom, freaking out.
Dancing around. What the heck's going on?
Well, because the Egyptians believe they would come back and need all that stuff. So
yeah, right, yeah. Would there nothing worse than you get resurrected into life and you're like, "Where's my gold encrusted, diamond jeweled vibrator?" Right? Where doth beeth my lawnmower? Right? You don't know.
What's this little dog doing here?
Right, exactly. Where's my crocodile? I had a crocodile. What is this Pomeranian?
Yeah, right.
It's like, where's my, Doberman Pinscher or Rottweiler? I don't like this dang little yappy dog.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Funny.
Dave, I wanted to ask you, how did you get started up into the whole radio business? Did you know somebody in the business already, or how did that whole process start for you?
It was a contract. I met this cloven hoof fellow by the name of S. Ayton, and he just said if I wanted to sign the contract, and I didn't have a pen, he said just use blood, and here I am. 19 years later. Yeah. So, Mr. Ayton, S. Ayton, if you're out there, I'd like a raise is really where it comes from. I loved radio as a kid. I wanted to do radio.
Okay.
I used to interview radio hosts in Chicago when I was a kid, calling them up on the phone and running them through questions. And they were always great taking my call. Here's a 10, 11, 12-year-old kid calling the biggest names in radio. And that wouldn't happen today.
Yeah, no.
Mainly because most radio shows are automated and they're not real live people anymore anyway. But I did that and just loved it. And then I went off to college and was drawn by, I believe, a supernatural force to the college radio station, KQAL. I worked there for 2 years. I befriended a gentleman by the name of Tim Dennis. We stayed buddies. He was in radio. I went back into the real world because I had kids and there's no money in radio. So he was single and happy and stayed in radio. And many years later, when I think I was 38 years old, he reached out and he said, "Hey, dude, I got a 1 hour spot to fill on Sunday nights. Do you want to do a radio show together?" And I said, "Sure. What time?" 11 to midnight. And I'm like, "Great. Let's do Paranormal Talk."
Yeah.
And we filled in. And that was, almost 2006, January 1st, 2006. So we're coming on the 19th anniversary of that first show. And even though I'm no longer with Darkness Radio, Tim still is.
Okay.
I walked away from it during COVID and then took a couple months off and then launched my new show, the Paranormal 60. So I've been in it pretty much nonstop since that first show. And then I was lucky enough to, as a big fan of Art Bell and Coast to Coast, I used to remember listening to, I didn't have a radio in my house because what am I, a lunatic? I just used to listen to it in the car, right? Our parents used to have radios in the house. We didn't. So I remember driving home from bar time, listening to George Norrie or Coast to Coast AM and Art Bell and hearing these unbelievable stories. And there were times I would just sit in the car for an hour listening to the story unfold. And it really worked out nicely that I eventually got to become a fill-in host, and I filled in for 5 years on Coast to Coast Radio. And then later on, years later, when Art Bell passed away, I took over his final show, which was called Midnight in the Desert. So I do share that one really interesting radio thing that I am the only person in the world besides Art Bell that did his first paranormal show, Coast to Coast, and his final paranormal show, Midnight in the Desert. So I find that that's a really tremendous honor for me.
Yeah, that's pretty
awesome.
neat.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Art was such a unique individual. He was so cool. I'm with you. I used to love listening to him, and such a cool guy.
Yep.
So how do you find the way you put content out and have a story for an hour every week? How do you find information?
Well, because I've been doing this, I have a lot of people that reach out to me. So after 18 years, and at one point I was doing 5 nights a week, 3 hours a night.
Oh, wow.
So there's a lot of books and people out there sharing stories. And sometimes my favorite ones aren't even the authors or people you've seen on TV. I get Grady writes me a message and he's like, "Hey, I've had a lot of really weird paranormal experiences. I'd like to do your show." And I say, "Well, give me some bullet points. Let me see what you've got." It's like, "Oh, I saw a shadow person when I was 7. And, I think my grandmother's ghost haunts the house." And I'm like, "Oh, that's pretty basic. I don't know that that's going to grab attention." You read a couple down and it's like, "Yeah, now, when I was a Cub Scout, I was abducted by Bigfoot and kept as a sex slave for 3 years." And then, "Oh, I think I saw a UFO over my house when I was 18. So I'm always like, "Wait a minute, what?" And then you go back and invite that person onto your show and it's somebody nobody's ever heard about. And they have these remarkable tales to share. So that's been part of it. I've just been very lucky, and I keep my eyes peeled, and I've got a deep, rich Rolodex of guests that I can lean into to find interesting content. And if there's something, and I've got enough friends out there that if I'm like, "Boy, I really want to talk about the Bloody Bones Man, but I don't want it to just be me talking about it for an hour," I'll call Mark Anthony, who's not J-Lo's ex-husband, Mark Anthony, psychic attorney and a longtime friend of mine. And I'll say, "Mark, I'd like to do a show on this character. Here's a bunch of reference material. I want to interview you about it as opposed to just talking about it. I want you to dig up this information. Let's have a conversation." So there have been plenty of times that I've taken guests who didn't know anything about a topic, turned the topic over to them, and a month later we set up an interview. And you would think this guy wrote the book on that character because he knows it so well. So I've had that, Jeff Belanger, Aaron Sagers, Richard Estep, Mark Anthony, I'm trying to think, Mike Huberty. There have been so many great guests and authors like that can just step up. Ursula Bialski, Rosemary Ellen Guiley, John Zaffis. They've got such a deep, rich history of stories that whatever I want to talk about, I usually have somebody that can come in and fill with me.
Yeah, so it's back and forth instead of just like asking questions and keeping the storyline going.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Now, moving a little bit to the UFO side quick, I have a question on the sleep dialysis. Why do you think that occurs during some abductions or most of them?
I'm sorry, during what?
Well, abductions, when
I
people
think
get abducted.
sleep paralysis.
Yeah,
Sleep
sleep paralysis.
Okay.
Sorry, sleep
I was
paralysis.
like, sleep dialysis. I've never heard of that. Are we making up our own shit now, Dave? Is that how this show goes?
I might be.
Well, let me
Makes
tell you about my
dialysis,
perspectivitis about this entire service and Mario conversation. Yeah. So sleep, sleep paralysis is an interesting thing unto itself. And this is what I tell you: if you've had a lot of sleep paralysis, I would go see a neurologist, have a sleep study done, because it's more than likely medical and neurological than it is supernatural. Doesn't mean that they can't also coexist. But there have been documentaries, and I did an interview, man, it must have been about 14 years ago, this guy that did a whole documentary about sleep paralysis, the old hag syndrome. And I thought, well, this is fascinating. And as we talked, the more I talked to him and he was leaning into the supernatural, the more everything he said really made me feel like this is not supernatural at all, especially when the big reveal is it usually impacts people that are side and back sleepers. Right. Which then tells you it's probably a neurological issue. Also, it can be controlled with medication. So I don't know any other supernatural condition that can be controlled by medication. So to me, it felt like this is something that is probably more neurological. Now, Dave, I wake up, I'm unable to move. It was like that for 5 minutes. I also understand how skewed our perspective of time is, especially in moments of panic. So while we're sleeping, the base part of our brain is working with our body, but it's pumping out this kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Anesthetic, to keep your body in stasis, so that while I'm dreaming about going toe to toe with Mike Tyson, I'm not beating the living hell out of the person laying next to me. Right. Because your brain can't tell the difference between a real and a vividly imaginative experience. So you're in a deep sleep, and all of a sudden your cat is in the room and jumps off the counter and knocks a glass over, and you hear bang, and you wake up. So you come to a little quicker than your brain was ready for. So the brain is still pumping that out, and then it stops for that 35 to 45 seconds can feel like an eternity when you can't get a full breath. And when you're in a panic mode. And now in your dream, I'm sitting there having a conversation with Brandon, and Brandon and I are talking about, are we going to meet up at Hooters or the Tilted Kilt for Wings and Vikings game this weekend? And all of a sudden, the cat wakes me up, and now Brandon is in my room, and he starts to turn into this dark figure, and every horror trope in my brain kicks in, and then Brandon scrambles up the ceiling and out the window. Now, that really didn't happen. It was your brain meeting in the middle between sleep and awake in the hypnagogic or hypnopompic states, and kind of aligning for a brief moment, and then reality and dream separate, and it's over. So a lot of times you feel like you're being paralyzed for a long period of time, when it's really, if we had a timer on it, probably no more than 45 seconds. Sometimes as little as 3 to 10 seconds. And the images you saw in the room. Now, it's interesting that alien abduction scenarios usually happen this way as well. Interrupted sleep pattern. It falls right in. Oh, my body was frozen. I was unable to move. Now, the difference is the ones that say I woke up, I was unable to move, and I saw these little gray figures running out of my room. That could be the hypnagogic, hypnopompic dream state. Now, there's a difference when then my body began to levitate and I floated out the window and into a craft. Suddenly, you're in a different element altogether. So do I believe that they could cause paralysis? Sure. I mean, if they could travel the universe or in between dimensions to get to us, why couldn't they have an effective way to subdue us? But this also happens around like Bigfoot creatures. There are people that will witness a Bigfoot creature, and you're like, oh yeah, you saw one. Why didn't you grab your cell phone? Why didn't you grab your camera? And a lot of times you're almost like hypnotized in the moment of witnessing this. And sometimes people, Dave, Brandon, Grady, and Dave Schrader go out and we cross a Bigfoot. We all see it. We're all kind of like, wow. And it walks away and we just go about the rest of our day like nothing happened.
Yep.
5 years later, I just happen to say, guys, am I dreaming this? Or did we once see a Bigfoot? And you guys are all like, oh, yeah, we did, didn't we?
Mm-hmm.
Why didn't we talk about it for 5 years? Right? It's like there's like almost like a veil that's put over our part of our memory. So I think there's different elements to some of these creatures, and maybe they're working with infrasound, which can scramble the brain and cause, kind of disillusionment or not disillusionment, but, discombobulation, like I'm talking now, but just causing you to be kind of cross-wired. So I think there's a lot of things we could consider, what's going on and what we're actually encountering.
Yeah.
Perfect. Do you have any UFO experiences? Anything interesting happened with that? Because I know I heard you say on one of your interviews, you were talking about you wanted to throw a rock or something, that you thought someone put a screen.
Yeah, when I went to the Isetti Ranch, I was listening to George Norrie on Coast to Coast one night, and he was talking to this guy, and the guy's talking about his haunted or his UFO ranch, the Isetti Ranch, and his name was James Gilliland. And I'm listening, kind of just hanging on his words, because he just sounded so matter of fact. It didn't sound over dramatized. It didn't sound, even though he was on a major radio station, it wasn't like he was doing it for publicity. It was more along the lines of just sharing what he was experiencing. And then I thought at the end, it was really weird when he's like, hey, and everybody's invited to come here. You don't have to take my word for it. Anybody's invited. And if you come on a clear night, you have a 90 to 95% chance of seeing UFO activity over my property. Wow. Now, gentle people, as investigators, or even just curiosity seekers, if I told you that at 3 p.m. every Sunday, the ghost of Elvis walked through my living room and ate a donut, you might think I'm nuts, but you'd show up just to check it out once, right?
Yeah, right there.
I was like, I'm going to go check this guy out. And I showed up on his property, and the first night was overcast. And although I saw weird flashing lights in the clouds above Mount Adams, the dormant volcano, he was trying to tell me that's their lair. I guess them and Dr. Evil with their laser toting shark. And he's like, that's why you're seeing the lights reflecting up in the clouds. And I'm also, I don't want to brag, but I've watched a lot of news and I know a few things about weather. Yep. Like most of the time weathermen are wrong, but that's neither here nor there. I do know that there are going to be different phenomena and anomalies that'll happen. And if you've got a low pressure front and there's gases escaping from the dormant volcano, could it cause what looks like light flickers, almost like the northern lights? And so I wasn't real impressed with that. And then I went back out the next 2 nights and saw things flying in the sky and moving at incredible rates and banking and going backwards. And then finally, the third night, I went out in the middle of the field, and instead of staring at Mount Washington or Mount Adams, I turned around and I watched the opposite direction. So I was looking behind his house. Okay. And he had these groves of pine trees. And from behind the pine trees, this thing came floating out. It swam across the sky like a stingray, and it was glowing blue. Now, it wasn't lighting up the sky. I always tell people it's like, those blue gel packs you get for the freezer. They're clear plastic, but that blue gel in the inside.
Yep.
And you could see the blue. It's not permeating outside that soft core cell, but it looked so weird and fakey to me that it felt like I was watching a bad 1980s music video effect. And I'm like, this son of a bitch has got a movie screen between those trees and he's projecting something. And if you're stupid enough to see it, he's just bringing. So I start running towards this thing. And now, mind you, this is 18 years ago. I was a lot skinnier and able to run still. I'm grabbing rocks and I'm throwing them between the trees. And I'm waiting to hear that the rock hitting something. Yep. And I finally get underneath it and I'm throwing rocks up and pine cones and anything I could to see if I was. And there was nothing there. Wow. And I go back to the group, and James Gilliland is just very calmly standing there. He goes, "What did you see?" And I explained it to him, and he goes, "Yeah, that's a half biological craft. It's half living, half machine, and that's how it gets in between dimensions." And I just remember looking at him thinking, I just saw this thing, and I have no explanation, but I want a hit of whatever it is you're smoking, right? But I had no better explanation for it. And, there are other elements to it, but that'll be in my next book, Theater of the Mind 2. And I'll be sharing that story because I did have a weird end around on that one.
Nice.
Interesting. but I went back there 3 times, and each time we had great experiences. And the third time I went back was with the cast of Paranormal State. You know, I was friends with all those kids when they first started their show, and I used to tell them about the UFO Ranch, but they were a ghost and demon show. And I remember Ryan calling me one day, and he's like, "All right, Uncle Dave." And I'm not really their uncle, but I was the old guy. And they're like, "Hey, Uncle Dave, well, we do a Paranormal State field trip, and we're going to go out UFO hunting. If what you told me is true, are you willing to back it up and join us?" And I'm like, "Yes, this needs to happen." So we went and we caught UFOs on film. So I'm very proud of it. I thought it was great. If you have the Max streaming service or Discovery Plus, look up Paranormal State. I think it's season 2, and it's the episode called First Contact. And I'm in that episode.
I think I've seen that one.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, my dad's a big non-believer of pretty much anything he can't see. But I got a fun U.S. story with him. Back probably in the 70s, he never believed in ghosts. He's out in the middle of nowhere farming, disking, middle of the night. Didn't see nothing. All he said was a craft or some kind of plane came over the top of this old damn international tractor. He put that thing in freaking neutral. He ran to the truck, and it said he's never freaking dug at night because of that. Said, "I'll never do it again. The bastards are gonna get my ass. I believe now."
That's funny. Yeah, you know what? From my understanding, UFOs and aliens, they love farmers and guys that are out digging stuff up because they're like, "Look at this guy. He's up for a good butt play.
Yeah.
We're gonna pull him on board. And we're gonna check things out."
Never dug after it anymore after freaking like 10 o'clock at night. He never went back. Left the tractor run all night, ran it out of diesel.
I don't blame him.
Oh man.
Good Lord.
That is, yeah.
What we've talked, Brandon and I have talked to a guest recently too, and we kind of talked to them about this. The difference between, there seems to be a difference between aliens that are abducting people solely for the purpose of the experimentation and the probing, and then there's the side of it where it's like they just want to take them for a ride and they just want to have them along for a little bit. Have you observed that too? Is there kind of a
you've been in that position, right, where you're kind of, sometimes you just want to pick the girl up and take her for a drive and see romantic, beautiful things, and then there's other times both of you are up for a probing. So it's just kind of in the moment. If the alien's feeling the vibe and you're kind of putting it out there that you're open for it, who's to say it's not the same alien? He's just a little bit more shy with Dave than he was with Grady.
Yeah, we're just not using lube this time.
Yeah, there's the weird thing is that there are supposedly these different races. But again, it may have to do with just the kind of person you are. Maybe they pick up on, that you're going to be somebody that fights this. You're going to be somebody that's not going to be worth the trouble, or they've masked that. We have anesthesia that can wipe out your short-term memory.
Yep.
Right? When I went in for my heart ablation, they're putting you out without putting you out. So you're kind of awake during the whole thing, but it's keeping your mind clear from being able to retain that memory. So I think that's why hypnosis is so strong for a lot of people that have been abducted, is that I think they find a way to screen or tamp down the short-term memory, and hypnosis can sometimes help trigger it or remind you of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
makes sense?
Good talk.
Everybody be quiet.
Yeah, how is it that there are 3 of you and there's these long pregnant pauses? Are you, raise your hand. Whoever has the next question, I'll call on you.
Yeah.
Okay, Dave.
No, I forgot what I was going to say.
Oh man.
So stand in the corner, Dave. You're in a timeout. Grady, what have you got for me?
I was going to ask you, who's the most interesting person you've had on your radio show?
Oh, that's impossible to say.
That's Grady.
Yeah, no.
I've talked to so many people over 18, 19 years and have been blessed to speak to some legends who are no longer with us, and to speak to some of the looniest MFers on the planet. It's hard to say. So I've really enjoyed different elements. Like I did a whole episode. This woman, Pearl Jr., she runs a whole website about Michael Jackson is still alive, and that he faked his own death. And the first time I did this interview, it was really fascinating. I looked over her stuff, and it was very much in the vein of, is Paul dead, right, from the Beatles, that old trope. So for any of your younger viewers that don't know this, there was a time when people believed Paul McCartney was dead and that they had replaced him with a lookalike because they were afraid it would destroy the nation if we found out that one of our most beloved mop tops died. So with the Michael Jackson story, you know, I started looking at it and looking at a lot of the covers of the albums and the lyrics and the things she pointed to, and the fact that his album that came out after his death was called Escape. And you see him and he's in this kind of like black bag, like this black thing, and it almost looks like a body bag. And you're like, that's interesting. And then there's lyrics in the songs that kind of lead you to believe. So I thought this would be just a fun mind screw conversation. Let's do this. And she claims to be friends with Michael, and Michael and her have phone conversations. And during the interview, she texted me and said, he's going to call into the show tonight. And I'm like, yeah, he is. And all of a sudden I look over and my producer has got this quizzical look on his face and he hangs up the phone and we go to commercial. I go, who was it? He goes, I don't know. He wouldn't tell me his real name. He just said that I could only refer to him as Peter Pan and he was supposed to call in. And I'm like, oh crap, put him in. Come on. And they're like, yes. I texted Pearl. I'm like, my producer didn't know, have him call back. So we come back from the break. Peter Pan joins us and amazing. We have this crazy conversation for like the next 40 minutes. And, you know, we're talking and things are going on. I just had to make my way out of the world and blah, blah, blah. You know, so it's just this very, and the voice is spot on, even down to certain affectations, right? In his voice. And I'm watching, at that time we used to have a live chat, and I was watching the live chat explode. So I've got, you know, several hundred people in there. Half of them are like, oh my God, he's talking to Michael Jackson. The other crowd is like, you're a heathen. How dare you believe this, Dave? I thought you were smarter than this. You know, this person's a fake and a fraud. And so when we get done and I say goodbye, I go, I just want to keep here, everybody, for a minute. I said, I just want you to think something. You tune into the show nightly, 5 nights a week, 3 hours a night, to look at the what if of the world around us. Yep. What if there are giant 8 foot, 9 foot, 10 foot tall bipedal hairy hominids that can live amongst us and we can't see them unless they want to be seen? What if we really are being abducted for nefarious reasons by aliens? What if fairies and trolls and ogres exist, and ghosts and demons and angels? You'll buy into all of that, but the fact that one of the richest men in the world, who is constantly being scrutinized and under pressure, might actually think, I need out. And might actually fake his own death to just get away from the insanity and all of the lawsuits at the time. And I said, and just think about this. What if 10 years from now, news breaks that Michael Jackson has actually died? He's been in hiding all these times. And there was that one night back in 2012 in a little radio station in Minnesota that we talked to Michael Jackson. And he admitted, you know, so I said, I love the what if factors of these. And he was so good. I had him later on Midnight in the Desert, and whoever she got was nowhere near as good as the first guy I spoke with. And this guy couldn't maintain the part of the voice would be like this. And then halfway through, he'd keep dipping into that voice. And I miss Neverland Ranch. And I wish I could go back because I love, you know, so that guy just kind of ruined it for me and ruined the magic of it. But I just love that concept, that what if and so that was a fun episode. And there have been episodes. I talked to Dan Aykroyd twice. Cool. Once when his documentary about UFOs came out, and once when his father wrote a book about the paranormal. I had Dan Aykroyd and his father, Peter Aykroyd, together on my show. I've spoken to the Fonz, Henry Winkler, on my show. I've talked to Bruce Campbell on my show. I've talked to many different stars and celebrities and musicians. Corey Taylor from Slipknot.
Yeah.
Bruce Campbell, I love that guy.
Yeah. So I've had a chance to speak to them, and to say one of them was better than the other for different reasons. You know, I spoke to Lorraine Warren 4 times before she passed. Once, the very first time was when Ed was still alive, but he was basically in a comatose state in the house. I was the first interview she granted after Ed died. Literally, like 5 days later, she said she would like to do an interview with me because she liked the way I respected her in the first interview. Instead of it all being about ghosts, the first interview was about her and Ed and the love that they shared and what brought them together. And so I got to talk to her 4 times. That's pretty, whether you believe that Warren story or not. She was a lovely, sweet woman who I believe was believing everything she said. So I can't tell because I was never there. But you know, I got to talk to Guy Lyon Playfair, the original investigator of the Enfield poltergeist case. I got to talk to Christopher Lutz, the youngest son from Amityville.
Wow.
Yeah, and whoever's got the pen and is clicking it, you might want to put that down because you're really doing it loudly and closely to your microphone. Dave.
Damn it, Dave.
Dave. No problem, rookie. Good to have you here. Is this your first show, Dave? Welcome to the program. My name is Dave Schrader, and for the next 40 minutes, I'd like you to hear this.
Keep me clicking the pen.
So, I've been lucky to have that many great guests throughout the years. And people I can't even remember their name. They were on Once and Done, but they told an amazing story. And you know, I was lucky to have them. Stanton Friedman, who reinvigorated the interest in Roswell. You know, Betty Andreasen Luca, who had one of the most famous UFO sightings and abduction cases. Travis Walton from Fire in the Sky. You know, it's been a really blessed ride getting to talk to all of these people. Dr. Barry Taff. I remember sitting in the car listening to Art Bell talk to Dr. Barry Taff about the Entity case. And I remember being riveted and then terrified to go into my house because I was going home alone to a dark house. And that's what I love, that theater of the mind, that way that your brain works. And then lo and behold, when I became a radio show host, I had him on my radio show. And then one of the first times I got to host Coast to Coast, I invited Dr. Barry Taff to be my guest on Coast to Coast. Wow. He's been on every iteration of every show I've ever hosted because it's just a pleasure to talk to the guy, and I like his theories and beliefs. But, you know, Bob Gimlin, I got to talk to Bob Gimlin from the Patterson-Gimlin Bigfoot footage and hear his story. I got to talk to Philip Morris and Bob Hieronymus, who are the men that claim that they created the costume, and the guy that was in the costume. And so I've had a chance to hear from everybody. Talking conspiracy, I got to sit in the same room doing a 2-hour interview with Lee Harvey Oswald's lover.
Oh, wow.
And she sat right there, Judith Very Baker. And we sat there, and she wasn't just a crazy old woman telling stories. She had scrapbooks that were like the size of encyclopedias filled with pictures of them. And they used to work at the same company, the same lab. And she had their punch cards because she did the payroll. So she used to keep his punch cards. She had all of this proof of everything she said. It was really, holy mackerel. I was sitting across from history.
Yeah.
Wow.
Dang. Oh,
you had a lot.
Yeah. Gotta put that in for a second. Wow.
Wow.
Hey, Dave, do you have a question for me?
Yeah, I clicked you the pen. I always ask everybody, for a first-time investigator, what would be some advice you'd like to give to them for going out and becoming a paranormal investigator?
First off, if you're fidgety, don't bring a ballpoint pen with you to an investigation.
Or Dave.
Entire EVP. For people that are interested in getting involved, first of all, I tell people, start asking the question, why? Why do I want to do this? If you're looking for just a cheap thrill and to get frightened, go to a haunted house, go to a scary movie, go on a roller coaster, drive with my ex-wife. Any one of those things are terrifying. You know, that's what I think you should do. I don't think you should incorporate yourself into people's homes and businesses that are seeking legitimate help and dealing with spirits who want help. Because if you're just going into it for a thrill ride, that's the wrong reason. If you're fascinated by what comes next, then go to some of these places that are well known for being haunted, that have tours and guided groups and allow you to investigate so you can see it. But then you're not putting yourself in a position to create havoc, you know. And by that I mean, and guys, living in Minnesota, right? I've had many people reach out to me after all hell has broken loose at their house with paranormal investigations, and they're like, I didn't think I had a demon in here, and this team came in and they did an investigation and left 15 minutes later because they caught a growl on their recording and told me it was a demon. And I'm like, can I hear it? And they give me the sound, and you hear, yeah, we're doing EVP sweep number 1 in the master bedroom. And we're going to ask the question, who's here? Oh my God, did you hear that growl? That was sinister. That really sounded like somebody burped.
Yeah,
an internal fart or a stomach noise. And they rush out. So there are so many people that are doing it improperly. and for the wrong reasons, that it leaves a lot of people in a scary wake. So know what you're doing. And then when you get started, start with the history. Start looking into why a place would be haunted. And you can do research. There's a great website called diedinhouse.com. And it's about $12 or $13 per report. But you go and you check out, okay, listen, I'm going to be, I hear 314 Main Street is very haunted. So I'm going to type in 314 Main Street in Heritage, Illinois, and then it comes up and I can elect to pay the $13 and I get the report. And it's going to tell me if it was ever a crack den, if it was ever a meth house, if there was ever a flood or fire. It's going to tell me anybody that owned it and died while they owned it. So I now have names to ascribe to it. If there were fires, tragedies, you're going to know. So that's a great place. Start with the education. Then now I'm going to go to that town and I'm going to go in and I'm going to research in their historical society. And so I'll tell you what, the ladies and gentlemen that work at historical societies, if you tell them, do you know anything about 314 Main Street in Heritage, Illinois? Oh, do I? And then they go pull out all these magazine articles and newspaper articles from the turn of the century. They're a great resource, or they could at least point you in the right direction. And then you start doing this, find out why these things might be taking place. If you can get all that information before you go in, you are so much better off, because now I have names. I know I might be talking to the ghost of Grady, Brandon, or Pen Clickin' Dave. It could be any one of them. And that gives me a power. When you know who you're going in to speak with, that gives you some power. And then, being able to address them and know things about them and their story so that you can help complete it for them. So that's where I say to start. That to me is the most important. And what equipment? Listen, everything you ever need is right here now in your phone. You've got an audio recorder, a camera, and a video camera. You can maybe download one spirit box if you want to into it, but start off slow. Cameras, video, and photographs. And that should be a good start.
Perfect. Since you brought up download Speeder Box, what's your thoughts on those apps?
Yeah.
Because I've heard mixed stories on them. Some people say they're good. Some people say they're worthless.
So here's a really cool deal. You guys have all heard of the Ovilus, right? That Bill Apple created. And the Ovilus is an interesting tool. He also created the iOvilus. So if you own an iPhone and don't have $400 to buy an Ovilus, you can buy the iOvilus, and it is the software. And you plug it into your phone. And it works just like an Ovilus for less than $2.
Oh, nice.
So that's a cool piece. Necrophonic was introduced to me at an event, and I was very skeptical. I stood back watching it until I started hearing it call my name out. And I wasn't the only one. People are like, it just said Dave Schrader, and sure as hell I heard it. And then we started getting, responses and questions direct to what I was asking. So I think that's kind of interesting. What I'll do is when I'm playing it, when I go to ask a question, I turn it off and I ask the question so there's not all the background noise, and I've disengaged the microphone.
Okay.
So now when I ask the question, the phone isn't listening to me. It's not triggering the words in the app to come. And then I say, my name is Dave Schrader. Can you repeat my name? And I click it and you hear Dave Schrader. Right. To me, then that's something important. It's not something in the phone that's doing it. It is something outside. Something is trying to communicate with me. So I like the Necrophonic tool. Those are really the only two that I've messed around with, is the iOvilus and the Necrophonic. There's another really interesting tool, but you have to buy it for like a laptop, and you have to carry that laptop around with you with a speaker because it's old software, but it works really, really well. And Lindbergh uses that, and we've had some remarkable experiences. We were at Vinton, Iowa a year ago, and we were doing an investigation with a group, and there was this young girl. Her name is escaping me. I want to say it's like Kara, and she was so excited, and she kept asking questions of the ghost. She's like, do you know my birthday? Do you know what day it was? Do you know what month it was? Do you know what year it was? And the ghosts are not playing. Nobody's talking. You're just getting the right. And finally, I look, come on, help Kara out. Can you at least say happy birthday? There's a pause, and then loud as day, you hear happy birthday come out of the speaker. And everybody burst into applause. And that was the only response we got all night. And I was like, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That immediate response is something I specifically asked for. And, I don't know how else I can't just summarily dismiss it. And throughout that night, we were getting, in other locations, we were getting a lot of activity through the box that was talking to us. So I like playing with a little bit of everything, trying it out and seeing how it works.
Nice.
Yeah.
Most haunted location in Minnesota. Which ones would you think that is?
The Palmer House Hotel in
Okay.
Sauk Center, Minnesota. I would put down my number one.
Since you brought that up, how did that go this year that you went to it?
We did it 3 times this year. I did 3 different investigations there. One early in the year with Sarah Lemos, and then later on I did one with Dalen Spratt, and then we just did one a few weeks ago with Sarah Lemos and Shane Pittman. We'll be back out there probably in the spring to do another one. I love it. The Palmer House always brings out the weirdness, and we have a good time. First Avenue is very haunted.
Yep.
There's a couple of bars in Anoka. There's a lot of cool places throughout Minnesota that you can visit that are well known for being haunted.
Right on.
Cool.
Yeah, the Greyhound Bus Museum up in Hibbing's pretty good. We
Right.
all went to that one. That one was very interesting.
There's an old orphanage in Owatonna that's very haunted.
Yeah, my grandma was in that one when it burnt down, actually. She was one of the ones that escaped from it.
So your grandmother burned down an orphanage?
No,
That's
she
a
got
good
out of it. But she was there with 8 of her brothers and sisters when it burned down.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is really weird.
Yeah.
Well, Dave,
As far as the Greyhound bus goes, I personally don't know anything about the Greyhound bus because
you didn't get to go.
I
Yeah.
didn't get to go.
You always got stuck working.
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
Poor Brandon.
Got some good friendship there, Brandon. Well, at least they didn't leave you out of like the haunted Hooters investigation.
Oh, right?
or something.
Hey, there you
Not
go.
yet.
Yeah.
Not yet. They haven't.
It's coming up though.
God.
Awesome.
The deja vu investigation, downtown Minneapolis.
Right.
Nice.
Jesus. Last one I got for you here, Dave. Is there one piece of like ghostly evidence that you can think of that was the most compelling you've ever seen before?
Yeah. There's a very famous photograph of the weeping woman of Bachelor Grove Cemetery.
Yeah.
That's one I've seen, but again, not being there to take the photo, not know it, I take it on its word. However, I'm very proud of the work that we did on the Holzer Files TV show and Ghosts of Devil's Perch. And we caught, I think, 3 of the best examples of apparitions on Holzer Files that have ever been caught on any TV show. And I'm really surprised more people don't talk about it. I'm extremely pleased with it. Not some little flitting orb or a bug zipping around that we're calling a ghost, but a full-on apparition. We caught 3 that are just mind-blowing. So I've been really lucky to be a part of a couple of really great series where we've got some unbelievable evidence.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Holzer Files, fantastic. Love
Thank you.
Love Holzer Files.
Thank you.
All right. Well, Dave, we appreciate it. Thanks so much for being on tonight. It was a great time. Even though
You got it, Clicker. Thanks for having me.
Thanks again. I appreciate you.
Yeah.
Brandon, Grady, maybe we just mute his microphone until he raises his hand in the future with a question. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there.
Possibly.
Not a bad idea.
Yeah.
He's only been on a handful of the 100 episodes that we've done.
Maybe he's never watched one then and realized
Yeah,
There's a reason.
Young kid.
Didn't break nothing tonight.
that's right.
I
Yeah.
have dabbled with the idea of muting his mic from time to time because I'm not in the same studio as him to throw something at him to stop clicking that pen.
Well, thankfully, you've got an old grizzled veteran that's a guest tonight that doesn't mind telling somebody to knock it off.
Right?
Yeah.
A very seasoned voice behind the microphone.
Yes. Thank you for that. I appreciate
No
it.
problem.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you, Dave.
Thanks a lot for having me. Remember, Theater of the Mind, Tales from the Darkness. The book is out and available on Amazon.com, or you can buy a signed copy on my website at paranormal60.com. You can listen to my podcast Monday and Wednesday nights live on YouTube from 9 o'clock to 10 p.m. Central, or you can watch the old episodes there anytime. And I am on WCCO Radio in Minneapolis, St. Paul, Sunday nights from 7 to 9 with the Paranormal 360. And you can listen to that show streaming on AM 830, or just ask your smart device to stream WCCO Radio every Sunday from 7 to 9 Central.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Have a good one.
Coming on. You
You
guys
too,
have a
Dave.
fantastic night. Well,
Okay.
cut out quick before we get in the show.
Well, end her
You
out.
guys, thanks for tuning in. We will be on, Grady and myself will be on tomorrow, so be sure to be tuned in for that show. Otherwise, thanks for joining us. You guys have a fantastic night.
Have a great
Bye,
one,
guys.
guys.